welcome to Confessions of a Rock and Roll Wifey. This is season 3, the first episode. I'm calling this season 3 Spill the Tea. And the reason for that is because I think that I've spent so much of my life, even though I am a very outspoken person, I've spent most of my life kind of not always speaking my truth. Yes, when it comes down to it and it boils, and then kind of overflows, I can't help myself. But in the times that are really important or in the aftermath, a lot of times I just keep my mouth shut and I don't really say what I mean or speak the real truth, which is the way that I see it. Now, we do all have our truths. So obviously, not always what I say is going to be the full truth, I guess, because, not that I'm lying, but there's always your version, their version, and then the truth because, this world and situations are multifaceted. So, that being said, that's what this season's going to be is me just basically saying flat out exactly how I feel about situations or about, maybe something that's happened in the past or about, you know, whatever. Most of you know me from San Diego. I call my podcast Confessions of a Rock and Roll Wifey because I am married to someone who is, I guess you could call him a working class rock star. There's actually a movie called Working Class Rock Star, and I remember seeing that a long time ago. And it's all about how the music industry is changing, and now we are in the future from that movie. And yeah, it's changed a lot. Nowadays, you have to do everything yourself. Even if you are to get a promotion deal, you have to pay a lot of money and you have to put in a lot of effort to make that happen. Studios and producers and, production companies are not always willing to go out on a limb or promote artists that are not already in their own right established independent artists. And that is what my husband is. He's an independent metal artist. He's in a band. It's hardcore metal, fast thrash, but also he's got amazing clean vocals and they're just extremely dynamic. And my journey throughout being his wife and being his girlfriend and also just being a part of the music scene in San Diego has led me to kind of where I am now. So, as I said, this is season 3. So, people out there who don't know me, my name is Ria, and I am a mom, a wife, just like a lot of us, except my story is just a little bit different. I started running around in the music scene in San Diego when I wasn't even old enough to get into a lot of the clubs. Back then was when they would get you in just from knowing someone in the band, or if you just look old enough and you could kind of, pull that off. And so I was getting into some shows, when I was like 19, 20, that are 21 and up shows. And I had, friends and bands that would vouch for me and so forth. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to create. Back then, I was doing a lot of pinup modeling, tattoo modeling, mostly as a hobby, but like I said, just because I love to create. And from there, I did a lot of videos of the music scene back then. If you go onto YouTube, there are some videos that I have posted of local shows, bands playing, me running around talking to the bands and to the people. So there's some really cool stuff out there if you look for it. Um, and maybe sometime I'll go look for some of it and drop it here so people can look at it. But that being said, my husband and I, when we got together, I may have been 30 at this time. So I had been running around the scene, had a few different boyfriends and bands at this time already. And Darren was my friend. And he had a family already, but not married, a girlfriend and 2 children with her. And I didn't see him as anything other than a friend until they were completely falling apart. And long story short, it's now 14 years later, and we are married and we have two children. A 9-year old and a 13-year-old. And they've also grown up in this working class rock star life. So we basically were heavily involved in the San Diego music scene. All of our friends are musicians. We had shows every month that we were going to all the time. That's just what we did. And it just kind of evolved with my love and passion for creating. And then, the pandemic and then the booming of podcasts as well. I hate to say it, but everybody has a podcast now. But back then when I started this, it was just popping off. And I thought that would be so fun to do a podcast. But it's awkward, like just sitting here talking to nobody. I mean, I know I'm talking to all of you, but yeah, I'm sitting here in a room by myself. So yeah, it's awkward. And I never wanted to do that. And I always thought, you know what? I have to have guests, right? Because that's where the good shit's at when you start talking and when you start, I guess creating as you go and not knowing what's going to be said. Yes, you have subjects. Yes, you have, kind of a flow that you want to go in, but that back and forth, that, I guess, spontaneous reactions and all that, that's where the fun is at. The banter, all the fun, spontaneous things that come up when you are, in that type of setting. So I thought, of course, that's what I have to do. And you guys have no idea, unless you've done this before, how hard that that it is to do a podcast. I mean, I really thought it was going to be a lot easier than it actually was. Not only the planning, the editing, but also the flow of the conversation. And then when you're editing, you're listening to your voice and you're just like, oh my gosh, you just like, it's like cringy as fuck. And I mean, it's a hard thing to sit there and listen to yourself. And then you go, why did I say that? You overthink everything. You just think of, as you're editing, you think of things that you should have said, and there's not enough notes in the world that you can take or write down beforehand that is ever going to prepare you for a smooth conversation, if that makes sense. And so my first episode that I did, I believe that was the Dustin and Tamika. So Dustin from Cascade Effect, great friend, been friends with him for, I mean, geez, I would say 16 years, maybe 17. And I think I met him when I was like 26. And I used to be friends with his ex-girlfriend, a couple of his ex-girlfriends, and he now is married to a beautiful, beautiful woman inside and out, Mika. And my whole kind of theme in the beginning was, okay, let's do couples, metal people that I know and their significant others. And we can do things like the newlywed game and things like that. And also I'll have bands on. And so then it kind of turned into that and not so much of like confessions of a rock and roll wifey, which is more what this season's going to be like. More of kind of like me talking about, I don't know, these are my confessions. Not really, but you know what I mean. And anyways, so long story short, I was working out the kinks. But the great news was I had an amazing team. I had a awesome photographer that was also like my production assistant. She helped me with everything. Arlene Rose, thank you, girl. You're amazing. It wasn't anything she was necessarily, emotionally invested in until she started doing it. And then she really loved it. It was just something I asked her to do, and she was wonderful enough to do it. And I had so many great musician, amazing, fucking badass people that I was friends with, that I still am friends with in San Diego, in the San Diego music scene. And my list of guests were not in any any order necessarily. Like I said, Dustin, the singer for Cascade Effect, G Dog, an amazing person, but also heavily invested and involved in the San Diego music scene. He puts on benefits shows, also a musician himself. I had Sean Jenkins, who is the guitar player for Cascade Effect. He's been one of my best friends for like 22 years. And I mean, just an amazing person. Again, so very supportive. And he came and joined. I had my husband on multiple times. I had a awesome show with Shane Zelm, who is actually his project is called Burn Run, like excuse me, like a progressive mixture of sounds from the 80s as well as like new sounds mixed with metal and techno and electronic, and an amazing show with him. He was a guest and he was so gracious. We did it at his house. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of him as well, just independently with his music, but also just a great friend again. Been friends with him again for like 20 years as well. I mean, and then I had a podcast with the Norse. The Norse they were amazing. They were so awesome to like do a show with me. And that was a really fun show. You can find that one on YouTube. It's funny as hell. We played Mary Fuck Kill and it was just hilarious. I also had Anthony from Defy the Tyrants. Defy the Tyrants are also a huge metal band in San Diego. They also have a huge following on TikTok as well as YouTube and Spotify, and huge fan of them and him. And I had his wife on him as well, and we did the Newlywed Game. That was so fun. That was one of my favorite episodes I did, and also one of my most disappointing episodes. And the reason is because I lost all the video footage for that, and that was like devastating. Still to this day, I will find myself like looking in drawers, looking in different things when I find them. Like, is it in there? Is it in there? And no, I still have not found it. But that one's out on Spotify as well. But I really want to drop it on YouTube with at least the photos because I did have some professional photos from Arlene. Arlene was taking the best photos of life of all my episodes that I was doing in San Diego. And my podcast was just growing, and it was getting better every time. But it was still kind of hard, like I found myself just saying the weirdest shit. I mean, when there's cameras on you and there's multiple people and you're trying to kind of, I guess facilitate like a show, and you have to kind of lead the conversation. You have to have very good communication skills. I did not go to college for communication. Okay. If it was up to me, to be honest, in the beginning and after, I've always wanted to produce a show with someone else as the host. But I've found that you can't really count on other people if you want to make something successful unless they are extremely invested in it emotionally and mentally as well. And we had Kevin from God Hammered on the episode with Sean, or I mean, yeah, well, Sean was there, and G Dog. I had an episode with Astrid that was a Halloween episode. Astrid is a fabulous fucking badass chick. She can do like hair metal, but also, more modern stuff. And she's just got a great voice. And the last episode that I did was Joel B. And Joel B is actually Anthony from Defy the Tyrant's cousin, but Joel has been in the San Diego music scene for almost as long as I have. I was kind of absent during the time when Joel came into the scene because I had dropped off and I went and got married. My husband is my third husband. I've been married 3 times. But like I said, I didn't even get together with my husband till I was 30. Thankfully, I never had any children. So that's good. But yeah, and Joel B, his episode was different than anyone I had done. And it was also the most comfortable that I've ever felt while doing a podcast. And I think it's because, we weren't we weren't talking about just bullshit. Like we were talking about real shit, like cut out all the bullshit. We're talking about trauma. We're talking about taboo subjects. We're talking about things that are controversial and things that people maybe wouldn't really necessarily, I guess, go straight towards. They would kind of shy away from. And his story was just, I guess, so touching how he was just so open. And that was the very last episode that I did. And so if you want to look that up, you can. It's Confessions of a Rock and Roll Wifey, and it's the Jolby episode. And, I thank him for being so vulnerable and for participating the way that he did. So fast forward, that was the last episode that I did, or in San Diego. And then we ended up leaving San Diego. Now, at first, it was not our choice to leave San Diego. San Diego is not only fucking expensive completely, I'm talking for like a 3-bedroom house, you would need to pay at least like 2,300 a month. And I think that's kind of on the low end now. And we didn't want to live in apartments. And even an apartment for a 3-bedroom apartment, I think it was like 1,600 or 1,900. Still super expensive to just live in an apartment. And we're not apartment people. Like, we just aren't. Like, even though we're San Diego people, we lived in a mountain town. We love our privacy. We don't like fucking people in our business. We believe in being loud and kind of just living life how we want to live it. And we had an amazing home out there that we were renting, and the owner sold it. Well, we weren't paying like market value for our house. We were paying, not as much as I guess the landlord could have gotten for the place. But there was a lot of problems with it. So that's what made it to where we got it a little cheaper. So, but it was okay. It was our little piece of heaven. And during the pandemic and everything, I mean, that was just wonderful. But when she sold it, we didn't really have many options other than get an apartment. And at this point, we had a dog. We had animals, we had goats, we had chickens. So we did sell all of those and got rid of everything, put everything in storage. And we kind of just were like, okay, what do we do now? Well, my mom lives in Arkansas. My grandparents live in Arkansas. All of them are from California. They all bailed California one at a time. My grandma, my aunt, my mom, well, my grandparents, and my cousin as well, who was my childhood best friend. And so we decided, you know what? Let's go move out there because my mom had bought the property next to her. She wanted to sell it to us. She said, "This is your house if you want it. You guys can come buy it from me." And we were like, hell yeah, but hell no. Like, Arkansas felt like the end of the fucking world. I mean, my San Diego people, you can vouch for this. Like, I know none of you guys would ever probably move here unless you were retiring or something. And so we kind of saw it as that. Like, we're like, okay, we have to make a decision. Do we want this quality of life for our children, who at this time were all, well, ours together? He has two, but he has two from another relationship. But I mean, ours were still small, so at this point, Darren's band was pretty established. And, with the digital world, it makes it really easy, especially after, he had a band right before this band that did a lot of things, via internet and just recording in different places and things like that. So we were like, I think this is possible. Plus, I mean, they're thinking bigger than just San Diego. San Diego's amazing, but like, you have to think bigger if you're wanting to do anything. And if you just stay playing the same fucking places in the same town forever and ever and ever, yes, you may be big in that town, but nobody's going to give a shit because you're still in a bubble. And the world is a lot bigger than you think. And I realized that once we moved. So we were like, okay, you know what? I think this is what's going to be best for our family. We need to do this. So we moved out to Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas. Now, this went out. When we got here, it was wintertime. So we just decided, you know what, we're gonna like hunker down, chill out, just enjoy it. I had gotten a remote job at that time working from home. And it was a pretty good paying job. So I was able to pay for all the bills with just my income. And, Darren did find a job though. He looked for a job once we got settled in and established. And summer rolls around and I start getting that itch. Like I want to do something. I need to start doing something. So then I said, okay, I'm going to make a podcast out here. I just woke up one morning and I'm like, I'm going to do this. First off, I didn't know anybody out here that was outside of my family. Nobody from the music scene out here. I had been Googling and looking and not Googling, but searching on Instagram, on different YouTube, Arkansas metal, what kind of metal scene do they have out here? And I figured we could just go to some shows. And I couldn't find anything. There was barely anything. And don't get me wrong, there's bands out here, but there was just nothing like putting it out there or promoting it or showcasing it, right? And so, yes, I got the bright idea that I'm going to do a podcast out here. Well, from the very start, I kind of hit a lot of not roadblocks, I'd say red flags. So I should have known. So I put out this ad. I posted the photos from my podcast. I said, I'm from San Diego. I moved here. My husband's a musician. We want to get involved into the metal scene. And I'm thinking about starting a podcast. And I'm like, you know, is there anyone out here that would like to be a co-host? Because number one, I didn't know anybody. I had no contacts. Who was I gonna, where would I even start? Right. And so I posted on a metal page in Northwest Arkansas that I was looking for a podcast host to be my co-host and for us to create this thing together. So like we barely even knew each other and we were trying to create this thing. And it was something that I really wanted to like do. So I was trying to make it happen, but she just wasn't there with it like that. And long story short, it just ended up being to where I was focused on the podcast and she had so many other things going on that she was almost annoyed that I was so focused on the podcast. But it's because I had been trying to make it happen and you can't force things. Like you really can't. And I should have just gotten the hint a long time ago and just realized, okay, I need to let this go. But I loved the name. I loved the concept. And it could have been something cool. Bottom line is I should not have tried to make a show in a scene that I am not like involved in. From what I noticed, there was a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of kind of, even though, good people out here and everything like that, nothing to say bad about anybody, but I don't know if I should say it, but I don't know, just kind of like territorial situation where it was like, well, this is our scene and you're just like a guest here. I mean, that's really what it came down to is that I was just trying to be involved and help. And the thing about San Diego scene is that everybody there is amazing, like fucking just cool ass fucking people. And everybody who knows Southern California, whether it's LA or San Diego, and I mean, not to be rude or derogatory or anything, but a lot of fucking people out there, like, they will kiss people's ass because they don't know who they are or who they know, stuff like that. And I don't do that, but I'm just saying a lot of the way things go down in LA and San Diego is that you literally could meet somebody at, the store and hit it off with them, and they could know a famous producer that's their uncle, and you could end up, fucking jet setting and the next day. You know what I mean? Like shit like that happens. Like I've actually had real life shit happen where I ended up hanging out with rock stars, when I didn't even know what I was going to wear that day, And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm just saying that that creates a culture of people welcoming in anybody who they meet, if that makes sense. And I don't know that that's a good thing or a bad thing. There's also really, really good, genuine people that just love people, and I mean, anybody out there that if they see you and whether they met you once or twice or they're your best friend, they're going to give you a hug when they see you or meet you. It's always going to be like, hell yeah, let's have a drink. You can literally become best friends with somebody the next day. And the Diamond of the South name and show just completely fell apart. But you know what? I blame myself. I never should have done that. I never should have tried to get involved or anything because you know why? Because living here is about living a different life and, taking care of my kids. It was kind of dragging me down a little. And that's not how I am. I'm high vibes all the time, cheers to you and, be happy, be merry. If you can either love me or leave me the fuck alone. And that is literally how I am. I'm San Diego. I'm SoCal. It's just who I am. So, that being said, I decided to reevaluate what I was doing with this whole podcast creation thing. And I was looking back at my old stuff. I watched a couple old episodes and then I watched the Joel episode again. And I just was like, man, that was good. And that was the one I did, like, I'm not kidding you. Excuse me, like 2 weeks or so before I moved to Arkansas. And I had this idea, like I take these detox baths where I just lay there and kind of think about everything and, go over life. And I had this idea for a podcast that is kind of inspired by the Soft White Underbelly by Mark Leota. He's a photographer, but also he creates videos on YouTube that are all walks of life, but mostly by soft white underbelly. He is meaning like the shit you don't see, the shit under the surface, the people that are considered the low lives or the broken people or people who've overcome trauma, people who are even doing better but were former whatever prostitutes, crackheads, like pimps, like all that stuff. Abusers, people who've been abused, all that kind of stuff. you know, at that same time, I just had like a light bulb and I thought, you know what? I want to create something that's kind of in the middle of what I did with Jolby with the Confessions podcast and then Soft White Underbelly. And so that's when I came up with Despite the Darkness. It's funny too because I thought of Despite the Wolves because that's a really good one, but that's a name of a band that I used to support and they're great, but I'm just not sure how they would feel about me using their name, even though they're not a band anymore. So, but then it evolved. I was doing the spider web in my brain and it evolved to Despite the Darkness. And so I'm going to be launching that very soon. The first episode is going to be just me because I can't expect people to get on my show and bare their souls and talk about their trauma and all the shit that they don't talk about to anybody, if I'm not willing to do that myself, if I'm not willing to bare my soul and get on here and do exactly what I'm asking my guests to do. And it's hard. It's hard. I did an episode, a practice run, and it's a whole episode of shit that I don't even know if I could sit here and say again. And I didn't tape it. It's just audio. So I don't know. I might do the first episode of me playing that and reacting to it or just doing it over. We'll see. So, but of course I didn't want to abandon Confessions of a Rock and Roll Wifey. I mean, I have technology. So, that being said, we are here. And I know that was a whole lot of words just to say, I'm back. This is season 3. And I cannot fucking wait for you to come and have a glass of wine with me, smoke them if you got them, and let's just talk about the real shit, you know?
Time has come for me to make my stand. Remember who I am. Instead of telling it all I'm wrong. What if I should not bring down? Oh, love, I'm ready to fail. I'm ready voices cripple me from deep inside. Hey, tell me how I'm supposed to feel. Oh, love, I'm ready to fail. I'm ready to throw myself to all of these walls. I do it all for you. I just wanna raise a true believe in anything. I just wanna feel without the pain and suffering. My heart is open for the drown. I need to feel my life. I'm ready from my